Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for Lifetime Adoptions Q&A for hopeful adoptive parents. This is going to be a quick 30-minute question and answer session specifically for adoptive parents who are new to exploring adoption, perhaps with us, Lifetime Adoption. I'm Kim King and I'm here with Heather Featherston, and we love webinars like this. We can't wait to dive into the questions that you sent in on your registration, and thank you for being so generous with your questions that you submitted so that we can have tons to talk about and we can know that it's all relevant to you and it's on your mind. If you are new to getting to know Lifetime, we are a licensed child placing agency. We work nationwide and you are welcome to fill out a free application on our site. We are Christian based and we are one of the very few agencies that does not charge anything for our application. You can fill it out with the QR code on your screen, or you can go to lifetimeadoption.com/apply. Now, of course, you may have questions and perhaps you're listening to the replay, or maybe you have questions that are a little more personal in nature. You are welcome to reach out to us. With Lifetime, you do not have to have a scheduled call or a completed application just to touch base and get some questions answered, either about your scenario that you're walking through or about Lifetime or just the adoption process in general. You can call to speak with a coordinator at 727-493-0933. You can also email me, kim@lifetimeadoption.com, and you can request our free packet for adoptive parents. It's chock full of information, so much great detail in there. We put a lot of information really trying to anticipate what families want to know and need to know in that info packet. So if you would like to email me, the email address is kim@lifetimeadoption.com. Let me know your first and last name and what state you're in and that you'd like to request the info packet. And if you're feeling generous, let me know your phone number and a little bit about where you are on your path. And we want to also invite you, if you are attending live on the webinar tonight, first of all, kudos to you for making this a priority and joining in a live webinar. And also if you're listening to the replay, brownie points on the board for you as well for continuing to invest in your adoption education and taking these steps forward to make this calling a reality. So Heather, I know they can interact with us in the questions box, and we invite questions, comments, and here we are in our quick Q&A, which we love so much.
We do, because it's 30 minutes, it's fast-paced, and we have some of the questions. We had a lot of questions submitted, so we've collected some of the ones that are kind of similar in nature. But for those of you who are here live, please don't be shy. Pop open that question box, send any questions you have about what we're talking about or more specific things, and we can shake things up and answer any questions you submit on the fly as well. So, Kim, if you're ready, we can jump right in.
Let's jump right in.
Okay, so the first question we have tonight is, can we pick an age? Can we pick the gender? Can we pick ethnicity? These all kind of go into what we consider to be your adoption preferences.
Right. So the adoption preferences are basically the characteristics that you choose to say yes to in your adoption. So are you willing to adopt a newborn up to a year old, a newborn up to 3 months, a newborn up to 5 years old? Are you happy to adopt whether boy or girl, either way? Are you specific on race, open to any race, or kind of middle of the road? Maybe your race with any other race is fine with you. So these are preferences, and these are definitely things you need to establish. You need to take the time to think about, talk about, research, pray on these preferences. And really what Heather and I invite you to do is learn as much as you can so that you can be as open as possible to what you would say yes to when chosen by a birth mom. And this is going to help you build such a stable foundation going forward, because there are going to be moments in the thick of things when emotions are high, adrenaline is coursing through your veins because there's a possible opportunity for you to adopt. Everything that you've been doing to build out the foundation of your adoption, such as your home study and your profile, everything, it's all in place. And now is the moment when you're getting a call from your agency and who says, hey, we have a birth mom who's interested in you. That is not the moment to have to research these things or have to consider these things. So what I say to adoptive parents is, well, first of all, I really love that Lifetime has this structure in place where we actually guide you as adopted parents through establishing these preferences with additional support resources and our guidance and insight before you even start the program with Lifetime. But what I refer to that as is making these decisions on dry land when there's not a
Mm.
rush. There's not a ton at stake just yet. There's not a birth mom on the line. You're not just like one moment away from getting a successful match in place or having to get on the road to a hospital 6 hours from you or something, which can totally happen. But you are able to think about, pray about, research, and talk about and decide on these adoption preferences. And that's a big part of our application process here at Lifetime. When you fill out your free application at lifetimeadoption.com, it's going to ask you for a couple of these. Specifically, it'll ask you what age you're open to and what races you're open to, maybe a couple other things, and mostly it's going to ask you about your family characteristics. The application is pretty streamlined. We've gotten it to a point where you should be able to fill it out within about 15 minutes, and it gives us enough information to help pre-screen and identify if we would like to explore further with you. So when you fill that out, you'll start to answer some of these things and then hopefully have a scheduled phone or video call where we can speak with you on at a scheduled time and help guide you in a more detailed manner through some of these things. You know, Heather, sometimes when people are filling out the application, it might be 2 a.m. They couldn't sleep. They're researching adoption. They're listening
Mhm.
to podcasts. They're listening to a webinar like this, and they stumble across our application. And maybe they've been looking at it, coming back to it. You know, we get a lot of views on the application, and that shows us that people are looking, but there's something holding them back from filling it out. And I just want to let you know that filling out the application is not a commitment to anything. It's simply starting the conversation. And that is such an important step before you make any decisions, because then we can jump in there with you and give you insight whether we are going to end up partnering together, or maybe we're just a stepping stone on the path that God ultimately has for your family and how He'll bring your child to you. But certainly, preferences are a big part of this whole process. At Lifetime, another thing I love about this is that we do get a chance to get to know families before agreeing to partner, because we only want to work with families we feel confident we can be successful with. And that's, I know there's another question about this, but a big part of that is, do we see adoptions on a regular basis that fit, within what you're open to? And that goes back to your preferences. So Heather, can they pick these things?
Absolutely. They can pick those things. They just really play into if we call it having open preferences or more narrow preferences. The more open your true preferences are, the more opportunities you're going to have to be shown to moms thinking about adoption. But by the same token, you also need to really ensure that whatever you are open to in regards to your preferences, you are truly open to. Now, this is going to come up when you are doing your home study. Your home study provider will approve you for a specific set of preferences, but but she will ask you what your preferences are. And really it kind of plays into the next question we got asked here, which was, how do you suggest we think through our preferences? And that was such really an insightful question, because I think, Kim, that too often people don't put uh, or maybe that's the wrong thing. They don't realize the thought process that should go into setting your preferences in adoption. So yes, you can choose age, gender, ethnicity,
Many
a
other
number of
things.
yeah,
Hmm.
a number of other things too. But you really, as you sit with these, you need to ask yourself, would I say yes? And if
Hmm.
you would, then say yes to the preference. If you would say no, then say no to the preference. Really, where you're going to find probably most of your time in processing all this is the maybes. Well, I
Hmm.
might say yes to this if. Well, then those might be no's.
Hmm.
Um, because that's really, like Kim said, I love you said, making the decisions on dry land. It's easier to make them without the pressures of time, without the pressure of hope of a
Mhm.
potential right there if I can decide to be open to whatever it is.
Mhm.
Know your yes, know your no. Know what you're prepared to parent, know what you don't feel equipped to. And if over time, through education, additional learning, those capabilities broaden, then you can always broaden your preferences. But really, the best way to think through preferences is what would you say yes to?
And I love that you said, what are we equipped for?
Hmm.
Families wonder, well, if we want to adopt, does that mean we have to say yes to special needs, a medically fragile child? We have two other little ones, or maybe we already have a special needs child. Maybe we have some genetic components that are leading us to adopt. And so it wouldn't make sense for us to say yes to a child who has a lot of medical needs. Maybe we're military and we won't always be near the resources that that child will need specifically. So, yes, deciding this based on what you're equipped for. But most of our adoptions are going to be a healthy newborn baby, which I think most adopted parents are equipped for, right?
Hmm.
The other thing to consider is what's our why? Why are
Right,
we adopting? What's driving you? What's compelling you to grow your family through adoption? Is it because you just want to be parents? You want to have a sibling for your child? You've been trying to have a baby, right? So, for example, something like specifying gender may not be a driving factor as to why you're adopting, but maybe it is. Maybe you have a
hmm,
couple of sons, two little boys, and your family would be complete with a little girl. So it wouldn't, and so you want to adopt because you would want to have a daughter. So it wouldn't
hmm.
make sense to leave it open. But if
Right,
that's not the driving factor, it makes sense to leave it open and not limit yourself. Um,
right,
people think specifying gender is a 50-50 thing, but it's really more like maybe a 70-30 thing because of all the unknown gender, that those are expectant moms that want to see profiles and they don't know the gender yet. So we have to
right,
present them with profiles of families who are a yes. And that's really what this is all about, making sure that you are able to say yes confidently when chosen by a birth mom. But we don't have to solve all of this right now. I think the best thing to do is to fill out your application and then hop on the call that a coordinator can meet with you. She can review these things with you, let you know what might be limiting or what's not something that really we see very often. So I think it's more of a guided process when you're establishing your preferences.
it really is, and it actually is really a great segue to our next question too, which is, how do we know if adoption is right for us? And I will just say, if you have listened to us this far and what you've heard us talk about is it might be bringing up things that you hadn't really thought about, like, what do you mean we shouldn't choose gender unless we are, have two boys and one a girl? Or what do you mean we need to choose ethnicity? Do we need to be open to more than our own race? Really pay attention to what's coming up, because if things like that are coming up, it may be an indicator you need a little more education around this. And
Mm,
I'd really like to know, which I don't unless you're here with us live, what I'd just like to know a little bit more about the the reason for asking this question, because I've worked with couples in my what now almost 25 years in adoption who weren't on the same page when it came to adoption. Sometimes that can be kind of a driving force of a question like this. Sometimes it can be more along the lines of families trying to find the right path, and they're asking if domestic adoption is the right fit for
mhm,
them. Other times, it it truly is more of a, how do we know what, we're at a fork in the road. We're either going to
mm,
pursue fertility treatments or pursue adoption. How do we know which fork to take?
mm,
Really, all of these things come down to, I think, understanding that it's time that you want to be parents more than you want to have a biological pregnancy.
mhm,
And that can be hard. And it's funny, we automatically, Kim, think that it might be more the mom who's that driving force in the biological pregnancy. But I remember a couple I worked with many years ago that the wife was just exhausted from
Mhm.
fertility treatments, but the husband was very motivated to have a biological child. And for them, it was kind of on both sides. He had to come to the understanding that he wanted to be a dad more than having a biological child. And, for the wife, she needed to be sure she was choosing adoption from a place of understanding that this was a whole new journey. And
Mhm.
while, yes, she was exhausted from the fertility treatments, it is starting a new path to parenthood that is going to have its own, steps to complete and hurdles to cross.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think it does come down to what Heather had shared, which is, do we just want to be parents?
Hmm.
And the how and the way it happens is not, we're not married to that anymore. We are at a point where we understand that adoption means surrendering a bit of control over many aspects of what this will look like, how these moments will take place. But the end result is going to yield what our heart's desire is, and that is to have a child, to have a baby.
Hmm.
And just so you know, over 92% of adoptions here at Lifetime are newborns. We do not partner with the foster system, and I think that could be part of this question too.
Hmm.
Perhaps they're wondering, well, is adoption right for us? Does that mean we have to have placements that aren't permanent? You know?
Hmm.
So adoption, private adoption is when a woman is choosing adoption of her own accord, voluntary relinquishment. She's choosing adoption and she's choosing you to be mom and dad. And she's able to make all the little decisions as to how that all takes place. So it's a very, it's collaborative, but it's also birth mother led.
Hmm.
And so if your heart is open to having a child who's not biologically related, and you can imagine learning enough to get really comfortable with surrendering some control, I think adoption is a good path to explore. You can fill out Lifetime's application and have your scheduled call even if you're unsure adoption is the right path for you. I know I've spoken with many families along their journey, and it is such a privilege to just play a role, play a
Right.
minor speaking role in the story of their life. Um,
Absolutely.
it is such an honor for us to be a part of that conversation and that support for you as you discern where the Lord is leading you. So you're probably not going to know if adoption is right for you until you start talking with agencies.
Definitely. And learning more and really
Hmm.
getting I'm going to say some personal guidance, which,
Yeah.
I know I'll speak for Kim. You can call and talk to her without for free. There's no cost
Yeah.
as you're
Yeah.
in the exploring process, and there really shouldn't be. Um, so
In fact,
definitely.
Heather, for our listeners, let's go ahead and give them the calendar link to schedule a quick 15-minute call.
Sure.
You don't have to have an appointment in order to schedule this. It's a scheduled inquiry appointment. You're just calling to get some questions answered and learn a little more. You can schedule yourself at lifetimeadoption.com/inquiry and just fill out the super quick contact form and it'll notify us you've scheduled, and then we'll call you and we'll have our conversation with you one-on-one to get down into a little more detail for you, and answer the specific questions you might not feel comfortable asking publicly on a webinar.
Right. So let's jump to our next question here, which is, when can we adopt? Which is
Mhm.
a great question. And there's there's no there's no easy answer, but I will say, you know, in order to adopt, you do have to get started. So, I remember, Kim, many years ago, I worked with a family who they told me they had been in process, not with Lifetime, to adopt for many years. And I just casually asked them, because I knew a home study writer in the area, and I asked them, well, you know, did who did your home study, thinking perhaps it was probably her. And they shared with me they didn't have a home study yet. So that was a bit of a shock. And if you don't know what a home study is, definitely call and talk to Kim. But
Mhm.
you cannot adopt without a current valid home study. So that caused me to ask a few more questions. Like, I know you said you've been trying to adopt for quite a few years. Can you share with me how you've been trying? Because, like I
Mhm.
say, so, long story short, they really were not in any process to adopt. They
Mhm.
were just kind of talking about it and hoping to adopt someday. So definitely, for families who want to adopt, there is a process, and you do have to begin. It is a legal process. There are requirements, including a home study, and you have to start. In terms of a modern domestic newborn adoption, which really is what we specialize in here at Lifetime, the weight in adoption is to be chosen by a birth mother. Families are chosen. And so at Lifetime, we help you create materials so that you're presenting yourself in a way that birth mother is actually looking for. We help guide you in that. So the weight is to be chosen. That kind of answers the question as to when we can adopt if you're looking at a program like Lifetime.
Mhm.
So I'll jump ahead here to the next question, Kim. I know that our time is flying by, and that
Mhm.
is, how are children placed with families?
Ooh, this is such a good one. Keeping in mind, these are usually newborns.
Hmm.
So typically what happens is you establish your preferences and create a profile with our guidance. And we start presenting your profile to birth moms who meet your criteria and you meet hers. So whatever she's also looking for in the type of family she wants for her child or baby. So then she looks at your profile. She has to meet her basic paperwork requirements, sign a few releases for us to share her information with the family she chooses, medical releases, those kinds of things. And then she can pick a family. And once she does and has met her requirements, we get to call you and let you know all about that birth mom and that scenario. And you'll know everything we know. At Lifetime, that is something that makes us different from most adoption professionals, that we give you as much information as we can. Moment to moment throughout that match through to the adoption, you'll know everything that we know. And that might seem like, well, duh, obviously that makes sense. Shouldn't we know this is going to be our child? But most adoption agencies do not operate that way. They kind of just give you information on a need to know as you go basis, and you don't get like the full file from beginning to end. So our coordinators, our birth mother coordinators, actually present all the details to you. So you know everything we know, and then schedule a time to talk with birth mom, maybe hop on a quick call or video call. Of course, we'll be guiding you. We provide lots of education and support. You get to talk with each other, and everyone can let us know how it went. Is it a match? From there, we're going to be guiding you and birth mom through to the time of the birth. We're going to let the hospital know that there's an adoption plan in progress with the patient who'll be, giving birth at their hospital, and that she's making an adoption plan and you are the parents she's chosen. So we'll give them your name so that when you show up, they already know everything that's going on and they are expecting you. They know you are there at their patient's wishes. And we'll help you understand a little bit more about how birth mom would like for things to go, because she'll create a hospital plan with us that we'll share with you. Of course, everything's subject to change. So be flexible. Flexibility is key. um,
Hmm.
and from there, of course, there will be a social worker at the hospital, and your attorney will show up to get paperwork in place, signatures, so that the baby, in most cases, gets discharged directly from you, from the hospital directly into your care there in the birth state. And then you'll just wait there for 7 to 10 business days for clearance for baby to travel back across a state line. So you're usually in a hotel or something, staying somewhere with your baby while you're waiting for clearance, and you're already beginning the bonding process with baby. If it's an older child or a baby already born, we're going to create a customized transition plan. So depending on how much time we have to work with, we might have a couple days, we might have a couple weeks, and depending on how long or how urgently birth mom needs to have this happen. Remember, at that point, she's not an expectant mom. She's a placing parent with a child that's already born. So she could choose that this is happening like tomorrow or this weekend. We do have more paperwork requirements, so we need to get medical records, if there are school records, those kinds of things. We rarely see older children, maybe over 5 or 6 years old would be we don't really see, but under 5, maybe couple times a year, could be a
Hmm.
6-month-old baby. I know, Heather, that once there was a birth mom and her mom
Hmm.
that picked a family, and they had an infant that was already born, and the family traveled out to visit the birth mom and her mom, and they hit it off so well that the birth mom and her mom decided, hey, can we just make this placement happen now? We feel like this is a perfect family. They're already here. Can they just go ahead and take placement? And then everyone was, of course, on board. And then the attorney got it all in place. They started their clearance for travel, the ICPC or interstate compact clearance to get cleared for the baby to travel home. And that was that.
Hmm. Absolutely. And that can be how that goes. But ultimately, this is kind of like the previous question, that how are children placed? It is primarily relying on the birth mother or birth parents to choose. It's just something good to keep in mind. That's
Mhm,
pretty much how all modern adoptions are in the US today. So
mhm.
we have a few minutes left, which is great because we have one more question here. And that is, what are the requirements for adoption? And that's a
Wow. That's a doozy. Well, okay, so if someone asked me that on the phone, if you called
uh-huh.
in and said, hey, Kim, what are the requirements for adoption? I would say, well, what do you mean by that? And they might say, well, can we adopt if we don't own our own home? So now they're getting specific and they're letting me know what's their concern.
Hmm.
Or they might be only 21 years old and they want to know if they're old enough. Or they might be 60 years old. They want to know if they're too old. So basically, there are requirements in your state that you have to meet, minimum requirements to legally adopt a child. And then every agency is going to have things that they're looking for as well. So, for example, the state you live in might not have a marriage length requirement, but the agency you're looking at may say, well, we require 2 years of marriage. Or the state you live in might say, you have to be 21 years old in order to adopt. But the agency you're looking at might say, well, we don't accept any families under 25 years old, right? So it just really depends. So your home study requirements are based on your local state. And when you call around to agencies, if there's a requirement that you don't meet, maybe call around to a couple more agencies and see if it's just that specific agency layering their own requirements on top, or if it's a state thing.
Yeah,
So
that's really.
usually couples need to be married in order to adopt together. That's pretty typical. Need to be at least 21 years old, need to be able to financially provide for the child, meaning you can pay your bills month to month, and you have to have a room for the child. It doesn't have to be furnished as a nursery yet. It doesn't have to be in a home that you own. It can be, a manufactured home, mobile home, apartment, condo, in-law quarters, as long as it does have a bedroom for the child, even if it's an infant, the social worker wants to see that.
Mhm. And then you do have to have, like I mentioned earlier, a home study. But quite briefly, a home study is more of a people study than it is a white glove test of your home. It involves getting background checks, medical checks, assuring that you can provide financially. And it will be a social worker that does come and visit your home. But again, she's not there to do a white glove test. She's just there to verify some of the things Kim mentioned, like that you do have a safe living environment and that there is room for a child.
hmm And one more thing to expect, you have to go through a background check, multiple level. It's pretty invasive. They're going to look at everything, background checks, child abuse clearances, and also a physical to show that, hey, your doctor wouldn't have any concern that you have the ability to meet the parenting demands of the child you'll be adopting.
Mhm.
So with Lifetime, this is an agency specific thing. We require background checks and physicals to always be under a year old. You will probably hear us say this at least 50 times from now to the time you adopt. It'll even be in paperwork that you read through. And, our coordinators that you'll be working with, because when you work with Lifetime, you get a designated primary coordinator who is your person who helps remind you when these things are coming up. Plus, we have a portal. So there is going to be no mystery as to if something's coming up in a month or two that needs to be updated. Not every state requires backgrounds and physicals to be under a year old, but I would say most are gravitating toward this requirement, and it's just a good thing to do. And this is why we require it here at Lifetime, because we're nationwide. You could be chosen by a birth mom from all across the nation, and what if her state only allows those children to be placed into families that have a background check under a year old. That's the last thing you want to be worrying about, or that's the last reason that you want to miss out on an opportunity to adopt that baby, especially let's say she goes into labor and just then is calling us saying, I want to
Right.
make an adoption plan. We definitely need a family who has everything current and ready to go, and all they have to do is hop on a plane and get there, go to the hospital, and meet their baby, period.
Absolutely.
So you
Yep.
want to be ready. And we get those adoptions. How often would you say, Heather, those sudden adoptions?
We usually get maybe two a month, maybe even more, somewhere between one and three a month. And those are very exciting times. But like you mentioned, they do require families who are 100% ready and not waiting on anything.
Hmm. So that equals at least 20% of our adoptions are
Hmm.
sudden. That could happen to anyone. It's not a surprise that that
That's right.
exists when you're working with Lifetime. When you're working with Lifetime, we have a lot of support for you. You'll have monthly check-ins, you'll have your coordinator, like I was saying, you'll have your portal, and you'll also have your twice a month webinars. So we're always reminding you of things and sharing scenarios and new developments, experience. We have private Q&A exclusive to our families in the program, guest speakers, adoption stories from birth moms and adoptive parents. So we have a ton to provide. So a webinar like this is very, I would say, entry level. We're covering the
Hmm.
basics. We answered many of the questions that were submitted, although in 30 minutes there was no way we could get to all of them. If your question went unanswered, don't stay in that condition. Reach out, send your question to me, or give us a call. My email is kim@lifetimeadoption.com. We're available for general calls Monday through Friday, 727-493-0933. Something I always like to mention when I say that is birth moms receive 24/7 support from first contact on into the future. So we do have round the clock support. But when you're new to Lifetime and getting questions answered, just stick to the regular Monday through Friday. And remember to fill out your free application. You can just go ahead and fill that out at lifetimeadoption.com/apply. And there's no charge for it, no commitment. It's a great tool in your research and exploration. You shouldn't feel as though you have to complete your research and make every decision before you even apply. So feel free to do that. And we are here for you to help guide you and continue to answer the questions that are on your minds and hearts. And again, kudos for you for spending this last 30 minutes investing in your future in adoption and becoming the best adoptive parents you can be. And we're excited to see where your path leads you and perhaps even be a part of that.